The stars were quiet that night. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something terrible has already happened. And in the middle of that silence, the wreckage floated, broken metal, shattered glass, torn wires, all of it spinning slowly in the dark like the leftovers of a meal the universe had already eaten. The ship had a name once, ESV Ares, Earth Strike Vessel, registration number 7-4-Alpha. Now it was just pieces, just debris, just a graveyard spinning between two dead stars at the edge of the Kepler sector. The Galactic Alliance rescue ship, the Verath Solon, dropped out of warp 60 kilometers away. Its crew had been sent to investigate a distress signal. A weak one, barely a whisper through the static. Most of the crew assumed it would be nothing. A dead probe, maybe. An old automated beacon that had lost its mind. Nobody expected survivors. Nobody expected anything alive out here. The Verath Solon's captain, a tall, gray-skinned Drathari named Commander Ovhan, stood at the front window and stared at the debris field. He had seen shipwreckage before. He had seen the aftermath of war, of accidents, of disasters that tore good vessels apart like paper. But something about this wreckage felt different. There was a stillness to it that made his secondary heart beat a little faster. "Scan it," he said quietly. His crew moved without a word. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Saveth was already preparing. She was a Solani, a species known across the galaxy for their skill in medicine, their calm under pressure, and their very, very long fingers that could work with surgical precision even in zero gravity. Saveth had 6 of those fingers on each hand. She had been a medic for 31 years. She had treated broken bones, poisoned bloodstreams, collapsed organs, third-degree radiation burns. She had never lost a patient she had reached in time. She was proud of that. She was also, at this moment, completely unprepared for what was about to walk, or rather, get carried, through her doors. Her assistant, a young Solani named Tevi, leaned over the scanner panel and read out the results. "1 life sign," Tevi said. "Faint, unstable, carbon-based, warm-blooded." She paused. "It is inside the wreck, deep inside, hull section 7. "Species?" Saveth asked. Tevi checked again. Her face did something complicated. "Human," she said. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Saveth looked up. "A human," she repeated. "Yes, doctor." Saveth set down the tool she was holding. She had treated many species in her career. She had read about humans, of course. Every doctor in the Alliance had. Humans had joined the Galactic Alliance only 11 years ago. They were small, soft-skinned, short-lived, and, according to every medical document Saveth had ever read, extremely fragile. Their bones broke easily. Their skin tore easily. Their internal organs had almost no natural protection. They had no venom, no armored hide, no regenerative ability of any real note. On paper, humans were the weakest biological species to ever make it to space. "Get the emergency pod ready," Saveth said. "And prepare the soft restraint bed. Humans bruise if you press too hard." Tevi nodded and ran. It took the rescue team 22 minutes to cut through the debris and reach hull section 7. They floated through corridors that had been crushed like empty cans. The walls were black with burn marks. The floor, what was left of it, was coated in a dark liquid that their suits immediately flagged as biological, blood, a lot of it. The rescue leader, a large Drathari soldier named Krev, followed the life sign signal deeper into the wreck. He had done dozens of rescues. He was not easily shaken, but even Krev slowed down when they found the human. The man was pinned under a collapsed support beam, a thick slab of reinforced metal that weighed, by Krev's estimate, at least 400 kilograms. The human's left leg was trapped under it. His right arm was bent at an angle that made 3 members of the rescue team look away. His chest was moving up, down, slowly but steadily. The man was breathing. "That's an impossible," one of the junior crew members whispered. Krev said nothing. He stepped forward carefully, checked for structural collapse risk, and then leaned down toward the human's face. The man's eyes opened. They were dark brown, an unusual color by galactic standards, where most species had eyes of silver, gold, or pale blue. Those brown eyes looked at Krev with something that was not fear. It was not panic either. It looked very strangely like annoyance. "Took you long enough," the human said. His voice was rough, cracked at the edges, but steady. Krev stared at him. "You aren't speaking?" Krev said. "Yes," the human said. "I am also bleeding, and that beam is not light, so if you could—" He coughed, and something wet moved in his chest when he did. "If you could move it, that would be great." Krev moved it. It took 3 of them to lift the beam. The moment it came free, the human, whose name they would learn later, was Corporal Jake Mercer of the Earth Strike Fleet, tried to sit up. Krev put a hand on his shoulder. "Do not move," Krev said. "You are badly hurt." Jake looked down at himself. He looked at his arm, bent the wrong way. He looked at the deep gash running from his knee to his hip. He looked at the blood, his blood, coating the floor around him. He made a face like a man who had just found a scratch on his car. "Yeah," Jake said. "I've had worse." He passed out. They brought him back to the Verath Solon on a flat medical board, strapped down carefully, his vitals transmitting live to Savith's scanner before he even crossed through the airlock. Savith was waiting. She had the scanner in her hand, and the readings came in fast one after another, and each one made her stand a little straighter, her eyes a little wider. 3 fractured ribs. One of them had shifted. It was pressing against his left lung. A compound fracture of the right forearm. The bone had broken in 2 places. Deep lacerations on the left leg, reaching muscle. Radiation burns across 30% of his back. 2nd degree. Blood loss. Significant. She estimated he had lost close to 2 liters. Internal bruising, minor organ stress from the impact, and his oxygen levels when they pulled him from the wreck had been reading at 62%. Saveth stood very still for a moment. Then she said quietly, to no one in particular, "This creature should already be dead." Tevi looked at her. "But he is not," Tevi said. "No," Saveth said. "He is not." She walked to the bed where they had placed Jake. He was unconscious now, but even in that state, even with all of that damage written across his body, his heart rate was strong, not fast, the way a frightened animal's heart races strong, the way a healthy heart beats after light exercise. Saveth pressed the scanner to his chest and listened. Boom, 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 steady, calm, stubborn. "Tevi," she said, "begin treatment on the leg wound first, clean it and seal it. Use the Class 3 tissue bond. I need to review the rib situation." "Yes, doctor." Saveth turned to the full-body scanner and pulled up the internal imaging. She studied the shifted rib, the bruised lung beneath it. In any other species she had treated, a lung in this condition would have already begun to collapse. The human's lung was still inflating, still working, pushing against the broken bone with every breath like it simply refused to admit there was a problem. Saveth found herself staring. She had a medical degree from one of the finest institutions in the galaxy. She had read every xenobiology paper published in the last decade. None of it had prepared her for this. She decided to begin with the rib. The procedure, in theory, was straightforward. She would use a micro-alignment tool to guide the fractured bone back into position, seal it with a bone bond compound, and wrap the chest to reduce movement. In practice, it was the most unnerving surgery of her career. Not because it was complicated, because halfway through the procedure, Jake Mercer woke up. Saveth's hand stopped. "You are awake," she said. Jake blinked at the ceiling. "Yeah," he said. "What are you doing to my ribs?" "I am realigning them," Saveth said carefully. "You have 3 fractures. One has shifted. It needs to be moved back into position." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Carry on." Saveth stared at him. "You are not in pain?" she asked. Jake turned his head to look at her. He studied her face, the pale blue skin, the large silver eyes, the 6 long fingers holding the micro-tool near his chest. "I am absolutely in pain," he said. But it is not going to help anything if I scream about it, is it? Savith did not know how to answer that. She finished the procedure. Jake watched the ceiling and breathed slowly the entire time. He did not scream. He did not even flinch. When it was done, he said, "Do you have anything to eat?" "I am starving." The crew of the Varath Solon gathered outside the medbay window. Not all at once, not obviously. They were professional, they had duties. But one by one, quietly, they drifted to the long glass panel that looked into the medical bay, and they stood there, and they watched the human. They watched him eat. A full tray of food that Saveth had found in the emergency rations, the human-compatible kind that Alliance ships kept for diplomacy missions. They watched him sit up in bed, unaided, less than an hour after arriving with 3 broken ribs and a shifted lung. They watched him move his broken arm, reset and sealed now under a hard cast, and test the fingers one by one with a look of focused concentration. One of the crew, an engineer named Pav, said quietly, "Is he supposed to be doing that?" "No," said another crew member. "Is he going to stop?" "I do not think so." They watched. Savith ran the blood analysis while Jake ate. It was routine. She needed to check for infection risk, check his oxygen-carrying capacity, make sure the blood loss had not pushed him into a dangerous zone. She loaded the sample into the analyzer and waited. The results came back. She read them. She read them again. Then she pulled up her medical database and searched. Human blood composition. She found the entry. She read it. Her 6-fingered hand went very still on the desk. Human blood, it turned out, carried oxygen through the body using a protein called hemoglobin, and at the center of hemoglobin, at the very core of the molecule responsible for keeping every human cell alive, was iron. Iron, the same element used to forge tools, the same element found in weapons, in armor, in the hulls of warships. Humans carried it inside their bodies. It was not a contaminant. It was not a disease. It was normal. It was biology. Saveth sat back in her chair and looked through the window at Jake. He had finished eating. He was now examining the bandage on his leg with the calm, professional interest of a man checking his own maintenance work. Saveth thought about everything she had learned about humans. The fragile skin, the soft bones, the short lifespan, the vulnerability to cold and heat and radiation. She thought about the beam. 400 kilograms, 2 liters of blood, 62% oxygen saturation, 3 broken ribs, and he had spoken to Krev before losing consciousness. He had complained about how long the rescue took. Saveth looked at the blood analysis on her screen. She looked at the iron reading. Small, precise, permanent, built into the very molecule that kept this creature breathing. And for the first time in 31 years of medicine, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt uncertain. She turned back to the analysis. She ran it again. Same result. She sat forward and began to type her preliminary report. She got as far as the species classification field, human, before she stopped. Because the standard template had a box for patient vulnerability rating, it was a standard field. Every species in the galaxy had one. She had filled it in 1,000 times without thinking. She opened the drop-down. The options were critical, high, moderate, low. She looked through the window. Jake Mercer was doing something with his uninjured hand, making a fist, slowly opening it, making a fist again, testing his grip. He caught her looking. He gave her a small nod, like a man who had just finished a workout, like a man who was ready to get back to work. Saveth looked at the drop-down. She looked at the options. She closed the drop-down without selecting anything. She moved on to the next field. 3 hours later, when Tevi came to take over the night watch, she found Saveth still at her desk. "Doctor," Tevi said, "you should rest." "In a moment," Saveth said. She was looking at the blood analysis, at the iron reading, at the tiny, impossible, stubborn red molecule in the center of the screen. "Tevi," she said slowly, "what kind of creature carries a metal, a heavy, dense, ancient metal forged inside dying stars, in its own blood?" Tevi thought about it. "A very old one?" Tevi offered, Saveth shook her head. A very strong one, she said quietly. She turned off the screen. She looked through the window one more time. Jake Mercer was asleep now, finally, his chest rising and falling with that same steady, stubborn rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. Saveth stood up. She picked up her jacket, she walked to the door, and then she stopped. Because the secondary scanner, the automated one that ran continuously on all patients, had just flagged something. She turned around, she looked at the readout, her blood went cold. There was a second human life sign. It was coming from the wreckage, deep inside hull section 9. The section that had been open to hard vacuum for 11 hours, Saveth stared at the number, 11 hours. In vacuum. Nothing survived 11 hours in vacuum. Nothing. And yet, the number on the screen was not 0. It was faint, it was weak, it was barely there. But it was a heartbeat. It was real. She grabbed her comm. Krev, she said, her voice very controlled, very quiet. You need to go back into the wreck. There was a pause on the other end. Doctor, Krev said slowly. Hull Section 9 has been in hard vacuum since... I know, Saveth said. Another pause. I will prepare the team, Krev said. Saveth kept her eyes on the scanner. On the faint, impossible, stubborn little heartbeat on the screen, she thought about iron. She thought about stars. She thought about what kind of creature could survive things that should have killed it. And she thought, maybe. She did not know humans at all. The scanner did not lie. Saveth knew this. She had used this same model of scanner for 11 years. It had never given her a false reading. Not once, but she checked it again anyway. She recalibrated it. She ran the signal through a second filter, and there it was. Still there. A heartbeat. Faint, yes. Weak, yes. But real. Coming from hull section 9 of the wreck. The section that had been sitting open in hard vacuum for 11 hours. Saveth stood in the medical bay with the scanner in her hand and thought about what 11 hours in vacuum actually meant. No air, no pressure. Temperature dropping to nearly minus 270 degrees. Cosmic radiation with nothing to stop it. Every liquid in an unprotected body would begin to boil away. Every cell would begin to rupture. The brain would lose consciousness in seconds. Death, for any known biological species, would follow in under 2 minutes. 11 hours. She looked at the heartbeat on the screen. It was still there. She grabbed her comm. Krev did not argue. That surprised Saveth a little. She had expected him to push back, to question the scanner reading, to remind her that nothing survived vacuum for 11 hours. Instead, he just said, I will prepare the team. And closed the channel. Saveth thought that maybe Krev had already stopped being surprised by humans. It had only been 4 hours since they pulled Jake Mercer from the wreck. 4 hours was apparently enough. In the medical bay, Jake was asleep, or at least he was supposed to be. Saveth checked the monitor before she left. His vitals were strong. Stronger, honestly, than they had any right to be. His blood pressure had stabilized. His oxygen levels had climbed from 62% all the way up to 94% in 4 hours. The laceration on his leg had already stopped bleeding. The bone bond compound on his ribs was holding perfectly. His arm, reset, sealed, casted, was elevated on a foam block exactly the way Saveth had left it. She turned to go. Hey. She stopped. She turned around. Jake was awake. He was lying flat on his back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, but his head turned when she stopped. Where are you going? He asked. His voice was still rough, still cracked at the edges, but clearer now than it had been when they brought him in. Saveth considered lying. She decided against it. There is another life sign, she said, in the wreck. Jake went very still. Where? He said. Hull Section 9. Something moved across his face. Saveth had limited experience reading human expressions, but even she could see it. A flash of something sharp and urgent behind his eyes. That section blew out, Jake said. That was the first impact. That whole section has been open to space since 11 hours, Saveth said. Yes. Jake stared at her. And there's a heartbeat, he said. It was not a question. Yes. Jake sat up. He moved like it cost him something. A slight tightening around his eyes when his ribs shifted. But he sat up and he swung his legs over the side of the bed, and he looked around for his boots. You cannot get up, Saveth said. I need to know who's in there. Jake said, you have 3 fractures, a sealed laceration, and a repaired lung pressure issue. You need to rest. I need to know who's in there. He said it the same way both times, same tone, same weight, like the words meant exactly what they said and nothing she could add would change them. Saveth looked at him. Krev's team is going, she said. They will bring whoever it is back here. You will know when they return. Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he lay back down. Wake me up when they're back, he said. You will not be asleep, Saveth said. No, he agreed. I will not. The rescue team went back into the wreck. Saveth watched the feed from their helmet cameras on the screen at her desk. The wreckage of the Ares was worse in Section 9. The walls had been peeled back by the initial explosion. Whatever hit the ship had struck here first, hard, and the structural damage radiated outward from this point like rings in water. The corridors were compressed in some places, gone entirely in others. The team moved slowly, carefully following the scanner signal. Krev led. He did not speak much. Saveth watched his camera feed and thought about what they were looking for. A human who had survived 11 hours in vacuum. She still did not fully believe it. She believed the scanner. But some part of her, the part that had spent 31 years learning what living bodies could and could not survive, kept insisting that there must be an explanation. A sealed pocket of air, maybe. A malfunction in the life support reading. Something, because the alternative, that a human being had simply endured 11 hours in hard vacuum, was not medically possible, was it? Krev found the pod in what used to be the emergency equipment bay. It was small, a single-person emergency survival unit, roughly the size and shape of a large coffin. It had been designed for exactly this kind of situation. Catastrophic hull breach, sudden vacuum exposure, no time to reach an escape shuttle. You got in, you sealed it, and you hoped. The pod had a small air supply, a heating element, and a pressure seal rated for 6 hours. 6 hours. The scanner said 11. Krev crouched next to the pod and checked the exterior panel. The power cell was at 3%. The heating element had failed 4 hours ago. The air supply had run out 2 hours after that. But the pressure seal? The pressure seal was still holding. It should not have been. At 3% power, the seal should have failed hours ago. Krev looked at the pod. He looked at the readout. He looked at his team. Nobody said anything. He reached forward and pressed the manual release. The pod hissed open. Inside was a young woman. She was small even by human standards, shorter than Jake, lighter, with dark hair cut close to her head and a uniform that matched his. Private Lena Voss, her name tag read. She was curled in the center of the pod with her knees pulled up to her chest and both arms wrapped tight around them, hands tucked into her armpits. Her lips were a pale, almost white color. Her skin was several shades lighter than normal. Krev had seen enough humans by now to know that was not right. She was not moving. For one terrible moment, Krev thought the scanner had been wrong after all. Then she breathed, one long, shuddering breath like something that had been held for a very long time finally releasing. Her eyes did not open, but she breathed. Krev exhaled. "Get the heat blanket," he said. They brought her in 20 minutes later. Saveth was ready. She had read the pod's exterior data by then. She knew what she was dealing with, or thought she did. Severe hypothermia, oxygen deprivation, likely frostbite on the extremities, possible cellular damage from the radiation exposure during the period when the heating element had failed. She had her team prepared, her tools ready, her treatment plan already mapped out. And then they laid Lena on the second medical bed, and Saveth ran the scanner, and her treatment plan changed. because Lena's core body temperature was 6 degrees lower than it should have been, and she was still alive. Most species Saveth had treated went into irreversible cardiac failure at 4 degrees below normal. Lena Voss was 6 degrees down, and her heart was beating. Slowly, yes. Very slowly. But it was beating, and it had a rhythm, and the rhythm, against all sense, was holding. Saveth stood at the bed and looked at this small, pale, barely conscious human woman, and felt the same thing she had felt when she first looked at Jake's blood analysis, uncertainty, followed very quickly by something that felt like awe. "Lena." The voice came from the other side of the room. Saveth turned. Jake was sitting up again. He had not stood. Not this time. He was sitting on the edge of his bed with his feet on the floor and his casted arm resting on his knee, and he was looking at Lena across the gap between the two beds, with an expression that Saveth could read perfectly well despite her limited experience with human faces. It was relief, raw, complete, exhausted relief. "She's alive," he said. It was not a question this time either. "Yes," Saveth said. "She is alive." Jake looked at Lena for a long moment. Then he looked at Saveth. "What do you need to do?" he asked. "I need to warm her core temperature gradually," Saveth said. "Too fast will cause complications. I need to monitor her oxygen levels, treat any frostbite damage, and watch for signs of cellular stress from the radiation exposure." Jake nodded slowly. "She'll be okay," he said. It was the way he said it that caught Saveth's attention. Not a question, not a hope. A statement, simple, flat, certain, like he already knew. "You cannot know that," Saveth said. Jake looked at her. "No," he said. "But she survived 11 hours in that pod. She's tougher than she looks. Most people are." He lay back down. Saveth turned back to Lena and began the warming process. Over the next 3 hours, the medical bay became a very strange place. Saveth worked on Lena steadily. Gradual warming, careful oxygen support, monitoring the cellular damage readings as they came in one by one, TV assisted, moving quietly and efficiently between the two beds. And across the room, Jake watched. Not constantly. He slept in short intervals, 20 or 30 minutes at a time, the way a working animal sleeps when it has learned that rest is a tool rather than a luxury. But every time he was awake, his eyes went to Lena first, Saveth noticed. She noticed other things too. She noticed that Jake's leg laceration, sealed with Class 3 tissue bond less than 5 hours ago, had already stopped showing the inflammation markers that typically lasted 2 to 3 days in other species. She noticed that his oxygen saturation, which had been at 62% when they pulled him from the wreck, was now at 97. She noticed that when she came to check his ribs, pressing carefully along the fracture lines, he did not flinch or pull back. He watched her hands with calm attention and then said, "Better than this morning." Saveth pulled up his cellular regeneration data. She looked at it for a long time. His body was healing at a rate that did not match anything in the xenobiology database, not faster than any human she had treated. There had been very few of those, faster than any species she had treated, period. She went back to her desk and opened the extended human biology files. She had read the basic entry when Jake arrived. Now she went deeper. She read about the immune system, a complex, aggressive, adaptive biological defense network that humans had developed over millions of years of living on a planet that was, by all accounts, actively trying to kill them. She read about the inflammatory response, how human bodies sent resources flooding to damaged areas at speeds that other species simply did not match. She read about bone density, higher than it looked, surprisingly high for a species with no external armor. She read about pain tolerance, and here she slowed down and read more carefully. Humans, the file explained, experienced pain similarly to most carbon-based species. The difference was not in the sensation. The difference was in the response. Humans had a documented ability, developed through both biology and culture, to continue functioning under levels of pain that would cause other species to lose consciousness or enter shock. They did not feel less. They chose to continue anyway. Saveth sat back and thought about Jake saying, Pain is just a signal. She had thought it was bravado at the time. She was beginning to think it was a simple statement of fact. Around the 4th hour, Lena opened her eyes. She did not open them slowly, the way most patients did. The gradual, confused drift back to consciousness that Saveth was used to. She opened them all at once, both eyes at the same time, and the first thing she did was try to sit up. Saveth put a hand on her shoulder. "Easy," Saveth said. Lena looked at her. Her eyes, dark green, another unusual human color, were sharp and focused almost immediately. "Where am I?" Lena said. "Alliance medical vessel, Verath Solon. You are safe." Lena looked around the room. Her eyes found Jake. "Hey," Jake said from across the room. "Hey," Lena said. A pause. "You look terrible," Lena said. "You were in a vacuum pod for 11 hours, Jake said. Another pause. "Fair," Lena said. Saveth watched this exchange and thought that she would never fully understand humans. Lena ate. She ate more than Jake had, which Saveth had not thought was possible. She ate and asked questions and made Tevi explain every piece of medical equipment in the room, and then asked if there was more food. There was. She ate that too. Saveth ran the full body scan while Lena ate. The results came back. The cellular damage from the radiation was present but minimal, far less than Saveth had expected from the exposure data. The frostbite damage on Lena's fingers was moderate, not severe. Her core temperature had come up steadily and was nearly normal now, and her heartbeat, the heartbeat that had been barely there when they opened the pod, was strong and regular. Saveth looked at the numbers. She thought about the pod's 6-hour rated pressure seal that had held for 11. She thought about Lena curled in the center of it with her hands in her armpits, using her own body heat as the heating element failed. She thought about the human body as a survival machine, not elegant, not armored, not built for any one extreme, but adaptable, persistent, unreasonably stubborn in the face of things that should have ended it. She went back to her desk. She opened her medical report. She found the section she had written about Jake, the part where she described the iron in his blood, the hemoglobin, the element at the center of the molecule that kept humans alive. Iron, forged in the core of dying stars, the biology textbook said. Every heavy element in the universe, iron, nickel, gold, was made in the final moments of a star's life, scattered across space when the star exploded, eventually pulled together by gravity into planets, into rock, into soil, and then on one particular planet, pulled by slow biology over millions of years into blood, into living creatures that carried the remains of dead stars inside their own bodies, and walked around on a dangerous world, and refused, stubbornly, unreasonably, completely refused, to die easily. Saveth looked at the two humans across the room. Jake was asleep again. Lena was asking Tevi about the ship's top speed. Saveth picked up her stylus. She went back to the medical report. She found the vulnerability rating field she had left blank when Jake arrived. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she moved her stylus past it. She left it blank again because none of the options fit, and she did not yet have the words for what did. She was still thinking about it when the alarm sounded. Not a medical alarm. The ship's main alert. Commander Ovhan's voice came over the comm immediately, calm and precise the way his voice always was, even when the news was not calm at all. All crew, we have an unidentified fleet signature at the edge of the sector. 12 vessels, configuration unknown. They are moving toward us. Saveth stood up. 12 vessels, unknown configuration. Moving toward them, she looked at her patients. Jake's eyes were already open. He had not been asleep at all. He was looking at the ceiling with his head tilted slightly, listening to the comm, with the focused attention of someone running calculations. Lena had stopped talking to Tevi. She was looking at Jake. Jake looked over at her. Something passed between them. A look, quick and wordless. The kind of communication that happens between people who have worked together long enough that words are just slower. Jake looked at the cast on his arm. He flexed his fingers, one by one. Testing. How long until we can move, he said. Saveth realized he was asking her. She looked at his chart. She looked at him. She thought about what she had learned in the past 8 hours about what a human body could do when the situation required it. By medical standard, she said slowly, you should not be moving at all for at least 3 more days. Jake nodded. And by human standard? He asked. Saveth looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Lena. Then she looked at the comm panel on the wall where Ovhan's alert was still blinking. I will get you both something to eat, she said. Jake nodded. He sat up. The alarm was still blinking. Red light. Slow pulse. Steady as a heartbeat. It painted the walls of the medical bay in short flashes. Red. Dark. Red. Dark. Like something breathing, Saveth stood at her desk and watched it. 12 vessels. Unknown configuration. Moving toward them. She had been on the Vareth Solon for 6 years. She had seen alerts before. Equipment failures, debris fields, sensor ghosts, the occasional territorial dispute at a border checkpoint. She had never seen a fleet alert. Not a real one, not 12 unknown vessels moving with purpose. She realized her hands were very still on the desk. Too still. The kind of still that happens when the body is trying not to show that it is afraid. She made herself pick up her stylus. She made herself look at her charts. She made herself breathe. Across the room, the 2 humans were doing something she had not expected. They were talking. Not about the fleet, not about the alert, not about the 12 unknown vessels moving toward them through the dark. Jake was asking Lena about the initial attack. What hit them? Where? Which system went first? Whether she had seen the configuration of the ships before they fired. And Lena was answering. Clearly, precisely, in order, like someone filing a report. Her voice was steady. Her hands were steady. Her green eyes were focused and sharp. There was no trembling, no shallow breathing, no wide eyes scanning the room for exits. Saveth watched them and thought, this is what human calm looks like. It did not look like peace. It looked like work. Like 2 people who had decided that being afraid was not a useful activity right now, so they had put it away somewhere and gotten on with what needed doing. Saveth found that more unsettling, in a quiet way, than if they had been panicking. Commander Ovhan's voice came over the comm again. Medical bay, status report on the human patients. Saveth pressed the comm panel. Both patients are stable, she said. One is recovering from multiple fractures and significant blood loss. The other is recovering from severe hypothermia and oxygen deprivation. A pause. Are they mobile? Ovhan asked. Saveth looked at Jake. Jake looked back at her. He raised his eyebrows slightly. One question in that look. What are you going to tell him? They are ambulatory, Saveth said carefully. With limitations. Understood, Ovhan said. I may need them on the bridge. We do not know what is coming, and humans have encountered more unknown configurations than we have in this sector. Stand by. The comm clicked off. Lena looked at Jake. Ambulatory with limitations, she said. She's being generous, Jake said. You have a broken arm. It's casted, and 3 broken ribs. Healing, Jake, Lena. They looked at each other. Then Lena almost smiled. It was very small, very brief, just a slight movement at the corner of her mouth, but Saveth saw it, and she thought, there it is. That is how they do it. That small thing between them, that almost smile in the middle of a fleet alert. That was how they kept the fear from becoming too heavy. They did not pretend it was not there. They just refused to let it be the loudest thing in the room. Tevi came to Saveth's side. She was young. Young enough that the blinking red alert light was making her breath come a little fast. Doctor, she said quietly, what do we do? Saveth thought about the question. What did they do? They did what they always did. They did their job. Check the supply cabinet, Saveth said, keeping her voice very even. Make sure the emergency surgical kit is fully stocked. Verify the blood substitute reserves. Check that the portable scanner is charged. Tevi nodded and moved, having something to do with her hands helped. Saveth knew this. She had learned it a long time ago. Fear shrinks when your hands are busy. Jake swung his legs off the bed. He moved carefully, not slowly, not hesitantly but carefully, the way someone moves when they know exactly what their body can and cannot do, and they are working precisely within those limits. He stood. He was taller standing than he looked lying down. He tested his weight on the injured leg, shifting slowly, reading the feedback. His face did the thing it always did. A slight tightening around the eyes that lasted less than a second and then was gone. "You should not be standing," Saveth said. "I know," Jake said. He took one step, then another. "Steady." He walked to the window that looked out into the corridor and stood there looking at nothing in particular, or maybe looking at everything. Saveth could not tell. "The ship that hit us," Jake said to the window. "It did not warn us first." "Most attackers do not," Saveth said. "In this sector they usually do." Jake said, "There's a border protocol. Even the territorial ones follow it. They warn you, they give you a route out, and if you don't take it they fire once, just once, as a message." He paused. "Whatever hit the Ares didn't do that," he said. "No warning, no single shot, full engagement, immediately, like they wanted to make sure nothing survived." Saveth felt the back of her neck go cold. "You think whatever is out there now?" She started. "I don't know," Jake said. "Might be unrelated, might be completely different, might be a trade convoy that just looks threatening on the scanner." He turned from the window. "But I'd like to be on the bridge when we find out," he said. Saveth looked at him. She looked at his cast. She looked at the monitor showing his vitals. Strong, stable, climbing higher every hour. She thought about the medical standard answer, which was, no, absolutely not, return to bed. She thought about the beam, 400 kilograms. She thought about 62% oxygen saturation and a compound fracture in a shifted rib, and the first words out of his mouth being, "Took you long enough." She thought about Lena in a pod with a failed heating element and no air, and a pressure seal that should have given out 5 hours before it did. She thought about iron in blood, about stars. She said, "If your vitals drop below 90, you come back here immediately." Jake nodded once. "Lena too," he said. "Lena too." Saveth agreed. They walked to the bridge, Jake and Lena side by side, Saveth behind them with a portable scanner, Tevi behind her looking like she very much wanted to go back to the medical bay but was following anyway, out of some combination of loyalty and curiosity. The bridge of the Varath Solon was not large. 7 stations arranged in a semicircle around the central command position, where Commander Ovhan stood. He was looking at the main screen when they entered. Every crew member at every station was looking at the main screen. Saveth looked at it too. The 12 vessels were visible now. Not physically, not with the naked eye, but as scanner returns rendered on the display. 12 shapes in formation, moving at a speed that the computer was translating into a blue approach vector line. The line pointed directly at them. Ovhan turned when he heard them enter. He looked at Jake and Lena. He looked at them the way people look at unexpected resources in an emergency, quickly assessing, recalculating. "Mercer," he said. "Voss, good. Come here." They came. He pointed at the scanner returns on the screen. 12 vessels, he said. "We do not recognize the configuration. Our database has no match. They have not responded to any hail. They are not broadcasting any identification signal." Jake studied the screen. He leaned forward slightly, resting his good arm on the console edge, his eyes moving across the formation pattern. "How long have they been in that formation?" he asked. The crew member at the scanner station, a Solani named Prath, checked his readings. "Since we first detected them," Prath said. "Approximately 19 minutes." Jake nodded slowly. "They haven't adjusted position relative to each other," he said. "Not once in 19 minutes?" "Correct." "That's a siege formation," Lena said quietly from beside him. Several crew members turned to look at her. She was looking at the screen with her arms folded and her head tilted, the same focused expression she had worn when answering Jake's questions in the medical bay. "Siege formation means they're not in a hurry," she said. "They want you to know they're there. They want you to have time to think about what's coming." Ovhan looked at her. "You have seen this before?" he said. Once, she said. At the Kepler-7 incident 18 months ago. Ovhan looked at Jake. Jake was still looking at the screen. What happened at Kepler-7? Ovhan asked. A pause. We discouraged them, Jake said. Ovhan waited for more. No more came. The next hour was the longest of Saveth's life. She stood at the back of the bridge with her scanner and watched the crew work. She watched Ovhan try every hailing frequency. She watched Prath run configuration analysis after configuration analysis on the 12 vessels, finding nothing. She watched the rest of the crew move between their stations with the controlled tension of people who were trained for this but had never actually had to do it. She watched the fear, not panic. They were professionals. They held it together. But fear, she could see it in the way Prath's secondary fingers tapped the edge of his console between keystrokes. She could see it in the way the navigation officer kept glancing at the jump drive readiness indicator. She could see it in the way Tevi had pressed herself very slightly against the wall near the door, leaving herself a clear path back to the corridor. She recognized all of it, because she felt it too. Then she looked at the two humans. Jake had taken a position beside Prath at the scanner station. He was not in anyone's way. He was not giving orders. This was not his ship, not his crew, not his chain of command. But he was watching the data with the quiet attention of someone who had read this kind of situation before and was tracking the details that mattered. Lena had moved to the far side of the bridge where the communication array was. She was working with the comm officer, a young Drathari who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, helping him cycle through frequencies, listening to the gaps between signals. Neither of them had sat down. Neither of them had asked how long the jump drive needed to charge. Neither of them was pressed against a wall near the door. Saveth ran a quiet, unannounced scan on both of them. Heart rate slightly elevated, blood pressure up a few points, breathing rate normal, not the physiology of people who were not afraid, the physiology of people who were afraid and doing what needed doing anyway. She thought about the human medical database entry on pain tolerance. It had said, "The difference is not in the sensation. The difference is in the response." She thought that was probably true of fear too. 40 minutes into the standoff, the fleet moved. Not toward them. Sideways, a slow arc, the 12 ships moving in perfect formation, like a single organism, shifting their approach vector by 30 degrees. "They're changing course," Prath said, his voice tight. "No," Jake said. "They're making room." Everyone looked at him. He was pointing at the edge of the scanner display. "There," he said. A 13th signal. Behind the 12, larger, much larger. It had been hidden in the shadow of the formation, masked by the combined scanner return of the 12 smaller vessels. Now it was visible. Prath's hands went still on his console. "That is," he started. "A carrier," Jake said. "A big one." The bridge went very quiet. Not the quiet of calm, the quiet of 12 people staring at something that changed the arithmetic of the situation entirely. Saveth looked at the carrier's scanner return and made herself count the launch bays she could see in the configuration profile. She got to 30 and stopped counting. 30 launch bays on one ship meant 30 fighters at minimum, possibly more, against one medical and rescue vessel with no weapons. The bridge stayed quiet. Saveth became aware that her hands were doing the still thing again, too still on the scanner. She made herself breathe. Then Jake spoke. "Prath," he said, calm as a man reading a weather report. "What's the jump drive status?" Prath checked. 83%, he said. "How long to 100? 11 minutes. Jake nodded. He looked at Ovhan. "Can you keep them interested for 11 minutes? He said. Oven looked at the screen. He looked at the carrier. He looked at Jake. "What do you mean, interested?" Oven said, "Hail them again." Jake said, "Different frequency. Use the Drathari formal address protocol. Long, formal, lots of ceremony. Make it sound important. Make it sound like you have something they want to hear." "I have nothing to tell them," Ovhan said. "That does not matter," Jake said. "You just need to talk long enough." Ovhan looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at his comm officer. Begin the formal hailing sequence, he said. Extended protocol, all ceremony. The comm officer glanced at Lena. Lena gave him a small nod. Go ahead, and stepped back from the array. The hailing sequence began, the bridge filled with the slow, formal cadence of Drathari ceremonial address, a language and a protocol designed for diplomatic occasions, full of titles and acknowledgments and ritual phrases that took time to speak and time to respond to. The 12 ships held position, the carrier held position, 9 minutes, 10. Ovhan was still speaking, his voice was even, Saveth did not know how. 11 minutes. Jump drive at 100%, Prath said very quietly. Jake looked at Ovhan. One look. Ovhan stopped speaking mid-sentence. Prath, Ovhan said. Yes, Commander. Jump. The stars moved. They came out of warp at the edge of the Solani home system, 300 light-years away. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then someone exhaled. Then someone else. Then 3 people started talking at once, and Ovhan raised one hand and they all stopped. He looked at the scanner, clean space. No 12 ships. No carrier. Nothing behind them. He looked at Jake. Jake was standing by the scanner station with his good arm resting on the console edge, looking at the clean scanner return the way a man looks at something he is glad to see but is not surprised by. How did you know the hailing sequence would hold them? Ovhan asked. I didn't, Jake said. Ovhan stared at him. You didn't know? No, Jake said, but it was the best option available, and 11 minutes is not that long, usually. He looked at Lena. Lena looked back. Usually, she agreed. Saveth looked at the two of them. At Jake, standing on a leg with a sealed laceration and a casted arm and 3 healing rib fractures, as calm as if they had just taken a routine jump between systems. At Lena, 20 hours out of a vacuum pod, color back in her face, eyes sharp, already looking at the scanner data to see if there was anything worth logging. She thought about fear, about what she had seen on the bridge. Every crew member's fear had been visible, in hands, in breathing, in posture, in eyes that kept moving to the door. The human's fear had not been visible, not because it was not there. She knew now it had been there. She had seen the scan numbers. She knew what elevated heart rate looked like. The fear had been there. They had just looked it in the face and kept working, and she thought about the question she had been turning over since Jake first woke up in her medical bay. What kind of creature carries a metal forged in dying stars inside its own blood? She had an answer now. Not a medical answer, not a biological one. The kind of creature, she thought, that was made by a hard world and a long history, and a million years of refusing to be the thing that did not survive. The kind of creature that had learned, so deeply that it lived in the bone, in the blood, in the quiet, steady heartbeat, that fear was real, and pain was real, and danger was real, and none of that was a reason to stop. She put her scanner in her pocket. She walked to where Jake was standing. You need to come back to the medical bay, she said. Yeah, Jake said. He pushed off the console and stood straight. He looked tired. For the first time since they had pulled him from the wreck, he looked like a man who had been through something hard. Walk with me, he said. Saveth walked with him. The medical bay was quiet again. The red alert light had stopped blinking. The ship was in clean space, 300 light-years from where the 12 unknown vessels and their carrier had been sitting in the dark, like a held breath. The jump had worked. They were safe. For now. Saveth stood at her desk and listened to the quiet and thought that it felt different from the quiet before. Before. The quiet had been the kind that comes before something. This quiet was the kind that comes after. Heavier, warmer, the kind of quiet that a room fills with when the people inside it realize they are still alive and have a moment to feel it. Jake was back on his bed. He had not argued about it this time. He had walked from the bridge to the medical bay without complaint, sat down on the edge of the bed, and then very slowly lay back. He was asleep within 4 minutes. Saveth timed it. 4 minutes from walking through the door to completely, deeply asleep. She had never seen anything like it. Most of her patients took hours to settle after a crisis. The adrenaline, the residual fear, the mind replaying everything, it kept them awake and restless long after the danger had passed. Jake closed his eyes and went somewhere else entirely, like a machine that had finished its task and powered down cleanly until the next one. Lena lasted 6 minutes. Then she was gone too. Saveth did not sleep. She sat at her desk and worked. She had a medical report to finish. She had been working on it since Jake arrived, adding to it in pieces, fitting the new things she observed into the spaces the old categories left. But the old categories were not working very well. The forms she used were designed for known species. Species with documented physiologies, established treatment protocols, predictable recovery timelines. Jake and Lena were not fitting into any of those boxes cleanly. Not because they were strange, because the boxes had been made without them in mind. Saveth pulled up the full xenobiology report on humans. The long one. Not the basic medical summary she had read when Jake first arrived. The long one was 340 pages. She had never read it before. She started at the beginning. The first section was history, human evolutionary history. She had known the broad outline. Carbon-based species, single planet of origin, approximately 200,000 years of modern biological form, but the details were different from what she had expected. The planet they came from was called Earth. It was, by galactic standards, a mid-sized rocky world with a large moon and an unusually active geology. It had a breathable nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. It had liquid water oceans covering most of its surface. It sounded, from that description, like a pleasant place. Then Saveth read further. Earth's wildlife, the report explained, included hundreds of species of large predators, creatures that hunted in groups, creatures that hunted alone, creatures that could run faster than a human, creatures that could swim faster, creatures that could see in the dark, creatures with armor, venom, claws, horns, teeth designed specifically for tearing through flesh. Humans had none of those things. No armor, no venom, no claws, no natural weapons. They were physically softer and slower than most of the things that wanted to eat them. And yet they had survived, not just survived. They had become the dominant species on the planet. They had done it not with biological weapons, but with something stranger and more powerful. The ability to think collectively, to pass information between generations, to learn from the dead and teach the living, to look at a problem and invent a solution that had never existed before. And they had done it on a world that was, by any reasonable measure, trying to kill them. Earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, droughts, ice ages, plagues. They had survived all of it, generation after generation, each one inheriting a biology shaped by everything that had tried to end the one before. Saveth read slowly. She thought about Jake under the beam, about Lena in the pod, about the bridge and the carrier, and 11 minutes of ceremonial Drathari address. She thought, they did not get like this in space. They arrived like this. They came from a planet that built them this way over millions of years. And then they looked up at the stars and decided that was the next place to go. She reached the section on biology. She read it carefully this time, not skimming for the clinical data, but reading every line. The immune system section stopped her for a long time. Humans, the report explained, had an immune system of unusual complexity and aggression. It worked in 2 layers. The first layer was fast and general. It responded to any foreign substance immediately, flooding the area with defensive cells that attacked without specific targeting, buying time. The second layer was slower and smarter. It identified exactly what the threat was, built a specific counter to it, destroyed the threat, and then remembered it forever. The human immune system remembered every threat it had ever defeated. If the same threat appeared again years or decades later, the response was faster and stronger than the first time. Saveth thought about this. A biological system that learned from every attack and became stronger because of it. She thought about the word for that. In most languages she knew there was no single word for it. In human languages, she checked, there was a word: resilience. She reached the section on pain. She read the clinical data, the nerve pathways, the chemical signals, the way the human brain processed pain information and routed it through decision-making centers rather than directly to the motor response. Then she read the cultural section. This was the part that slowed her down the most. Humans, the report noted, had developed across their history a relationship with pain that was unlike any other species on record. In many human cultures, the ability to endure pain without stopping was not just valued, it was celebrated. There were human stories, thousands of years old, about individuals who had endured terrible things and kept going. Those stories were passed down, generation to generation. They were told to children. The children grew up knowing them. And somewhere in that knowing, the report suggested something happened. The stories became a kind of instruction, not just what to admire, but how to be. Savith sat back and thought about that for a long time. She thought about a species that told its young for thousands of years. This is what endurance looks like. This is what it means to keep going. This is what we are. And she thought, after thousands of years of telling those stories, after thousands of years of the people who kept going passing that keeping going to their children, what would the children become? Jake woke up at the 6-hour mark, not gradually, all at once, both eyes open, fully present. The way Lena had woken up in the pod, he looked at the ceiling for 3 seconds. Then he looked at Savith. How long? He said. 6 hours, she said. He nodded. He sat up. This time when he moved, the tightening around his eyes was less, Savith noticed. She came to the bed with her scanner and ran a check without asking. The rib fractures were progressing faster than any bone healing she had documented. The laceration on his leg showed tissue regeneration that was, by her measurements, approximately 3 times the rate she would expect from comparable damage in any other species she had treated. The bruising across his back had faded from deep purple to a pale yellow-green. She stood with the scanner in her hand and looked at the numbers. "You are healing," she said. "Yeah," Jake said. "I tend to." He said it simply, without pride, the way someone states a fact about themselves that they have known for so long it has stopped being remarkable. Savith looked at him. "Does it surprise you?" she asked. "Your own healing rate?" Jake thought about it. "No," he said. "It surprised me the first time. A long time ago. When I was young, I got hurt, I thought it was bad, and then it wasn't. And my father told me we heal. That's what we do. And I believed him." He paused. "I've believed him every time since," he said. Savith was quiet for a moment. "Your father told you that," she said. "His father told him," Jake said. "And his father before that. Goes back a long way." He looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the thing that comes just before one. "Is this for the report?" He said, "Yes." Savith said, "In a way." "What's it say so far?" Savith looked at her screen. "It says you should not have survived the initial impact," she said. "It says your recovery rate does not match my reference data. It says your companion survived conditions that exceed every documented tolerance threshold for carbon-based life in the Alliance database." Jake listened. "And?" He said. "And I have a field I cannot fill in," Savith said. "The vulnerability rating, I cannot find the right category." Jake looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Put low." "Low does not cover it," Savith said. "Then put very low. That is not a category." "Make it 1, he said. Lena woke up an hour later. She went through the same process Jake had. Ceiling, full awareness, sit-up, and then she immediately asked for the current ship status, Savith told her. "Safe, clean space, no pursuit detected, course set for the nearest Alliance station." Lena nodded. She swung her legs off the bed and tested her feet on the floor. Savith started to say something. Lena held up one hand. Not rudely, just one moment, and stood. She stood still for 3 seconds, testing. Then she walked to the window and back. Then she sat back down on the bed and looked at Savith. "I'm okay," she said. Savith ran the scan. She was, by every measure, significantly better than she had any medical right to be after what she had been through. "Eat something," Savith said. "Already planning on it," Lena said. They ate together, the two of them, side by side on their respective beds with trays on their laps. talking in the low, easy way of people who have been through something together and come out the other side. Saveth worked at her desk and listened without meaning to. They talked about the Aries, about the crew. There was a list of names between them, people who had been on the ship when it was hit, people who had not made it out. They went through the names quietly, not crying, not in the way Saveth might have expected. No dramatic grief, no visible breakdown, just names, spoken carefully given their weight, set down. She remembered this one's sense of humor, Jake said. She was good at her job, Lena said of another. He always shared his food on long missions, Jake said. Saveth listened and thought about the cultural report section she had read. She had read that humans processed loss communally, that the act of speaking the names of the dead together was part of how they carried the weight of it. Listening to Jake and Lena, she understood that differently now than she had reading it on a page. On a page it was data. In the room, it was something else. It was two people holding something heavy between them, so neither one had to hold all of it alone. Commander Ovhan came to the medical bay 2 hours later. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the two humans, and then he came in and stood in the center of the room with the straight-backed posture of someone who has made a decision and is going to deliver it clearly. "I am filing my incident report with Alliance Command," he said. "I want to include your account of what happened to the Ares and your assessment of the fleet we encountered. Your observations on the bridge were valuable." Jake and Lena both nodded. "I am also," Ovhan said, and here his voice shifted slightly, became less formal. "Going to include a supplementary note, a personal one." He paused. Saveth looked up from her desk. "I have served in the Alliance fleet for 22 years, Ovhan said. "I have served alongside many species. I have had crew members from 14 different worlds. I have commanded rescue missions, border patrols, diplomatic escorts. I have been in 4 significant engagements." He looked at Jake. "I have never seen anything on a bridge like what I saw today," he said. "And I have seen a great deal." Jake said nothing. Lena said nothing. Ovhan nodded once, like something had been settled. "Rest," he said. "We reached the station in 18 hours. He left. The room was quiet. Then Lena said very quietly, "He's going to tell everyone." "Probably," Jake said. "People are going to start looking at us differently." "Also probably." Lena was quiet for a moment. "Is that okay?" she asked. Jake thought about it. "Depends on whether they look at us like we're useful or like we're strange," he said. Lena considered this. "Both, probably," she said. "Yeah," Jake said. "Both, probably." That night, or what counted as night on a ship where the lights dimmed on a timer, Saveth finished the report. It took her 4 more hours after Jake and Lena finally slept. She went through every section: vitals, treatment, recovery, observations, anomalies. There were a lot of anomalies. She documented every one. When she reached the conclusion section, she stopped and looked at the blank space for a long time. Then she began to write. She wrote about the beam. She wrote about the blood. She wrote about iron, real iron, the same iron in the core of planets and the edge of stars, living inside the molecule that carried oxygen through human cells. She wrote about Lena in the pod. She wrote about the bridge and the 11 minutes and the way the two humans had stood still in the middle of something terrifying and done what needed doing without making it about how they felt. She wrote about the stories Jake's father had told him, and his father before that. She wrote about resilience. She wrote about the strange and specific kind of strength that comes not from being hard to hurt, but from refusing to stop when you are. Then she got to the last line, the conclusion. In her training, she had been taught that a good medical conclusion was short, clear, and clinical. She wrote 3 versions. She deleted 2 of them. The third one she kept. It read, "Humans are not the weakest species in the Alliance. They are the most misunderstood. They feel everything we feel: pain, cold, fear, loss. They are not numb to any of it. The difference is not what they feel. The difference is what they do with it. They have been shaped by a hard world over a very long time into something that the rest of us do not yet have a category for. I recommend we make one." She read it back. She thought about adding more. She left it as it was. She saved the report. The lights in the medical bay were dim. Jake and Lena were asleep. Saveth stood at the window that looked out into space. Not the corridor window, the outer one. The small rectangle of reinforced glass set into the hull that looked out at the actual dark. The stars were out there, billions of them, each one a furnace burning through its fuel over millions of years, fusing lighter elements into heavier ones. Hydrogen into helium, helium into carbon, carbon into oxygen, oxygen into iron, all the way up to iron. And then the star could go no further. The iron at the center of the star did not release energy when it fused, it absorbed it. And the star, unable to continue, collapsed, and then exploded, and scattered everything it had built across the galaxy. The iron, too. The iron, most of all, out into the dark, in all directions for millions of years, drifting with the dust and the gas until gravity pulled it together again into new planets, new rocks, new soil, and on one particular rocky planet, in one particular star system, slow biology had found that iron over millions of years and done something extraordinary with it. It had put it to work, inside blood, inside living creatures, inside creatures that walked upright and told stories to their children and looked up at the stars, the very stars that had made the iron in their veins, and thought, "We should go there." Saveth stood at the window and looked at the stars. She thought about what it meant to carry something forged in a dying star inside your own blood. She thought maybe it meant you were not separate from the universe. Maybe it meant you were made of it. The same fire, the same elements, the same long, slow story, just arranged differently, just breathing, just walking around on two legs, just refusing to stop. She put her hand flat against the cold glass. She looked out at all that light. And she thought, no wonder. No wonder they came out here. No wonder they look at the dark and do not flinch. They already have stars inside them. They have always had stars inside them. They just forgot to mention it. 18 hours later, the Varath Solon docked at Alliance Station Meridian. Jake and Lena walked off the ship on their own feet. Jake's arm was still in the cast. Lena's fingers were still wrapped where the frostbite had been worst. They walked steadily, side by side, the way they had stood on the bridge. Saveth watched them from the docking bay door. She watched the station crew look at them, the curious glances, the double takes, the quiet questions passing between people who had already heard something about the two humans from the rescue ship. She watched Jake and Lena not notice, or notice and not mind. She watched them reach the end of the docking ramp and stop. Jake turned and looked back at the ship. He looked at it the way people look at places that have meant something. Then he looked at Saveth. He raised his good hand, a small gesture, simple. She raised hers back. He turned and walked into the station. Lena followed. Saveth stood in the docking bay doorway for a long time after they were gone. She thought about the report, about the last line. I recommend we make one. A new category. For a species that felt everything and stopped for nothing. For creatures made of iron and stories and a very long stubbornness. For the ones who had looked at a hard universe and decided quietly without drama, without asking anyone's permission, we will go there too, and we will come back. She turned and walked back into the ship. She had work to do. End.